Hello everybody. Welcome to the QuarkXPress 9 eSeminar. I'm Dan Logan. I'm one of the product managers here at Quark. And this month we're going to look at 4 different productivity features that we added to QuarkXPress 9. These are kind of a grab bag of different utility functions, many of which have been asked for by a lot of customers over the years, and we're excited to get them into the product in version 9. Let's take a look at software. I'm not going to show a lot of slides this time around. The first feature that I want to look at is called Linkster. We've had a lot of customers request enhancements to the text linking tool. So linking is when you have a story of text that flows across multiple text boxes. People have asked that we enhance the text linking tool to allow it to do a number of things that it couldn't do in the past, like the ability to link together existing text boxes that all already contain text, or the ability to unlink linked boxes without disturbing the position of the text in each of those boxes. In version 9, we don't have that as enhancements to the text linking tool, but we do have a new utility called Linkster that you can use to do all of that stuff. So let's take a look at how it works. Over here on the right-hand side, we have a number of small text boxes that each have a little chunk of information about our annual report. You can see here that these boxes are not linked. They are all separate, and if I do a select all in each one, we can see that those are unlinked boxes. But let's say that I need to link them for some reason. Perhaps I want to export all of the text on this page, and I want to do it all in one action. In order to do that, I have to combine it into a single story. So in this case, all I'm going to do is select all the boxes. I'll even include our headline here. I'll go to the Utilities menu and go down to the new option, Linkster. This is going to open up the Linkster dialog, and in here I basically need to specify 2 things. The first is, what is the scope of the action that I'm going to perform? It can either act upon the selection of boxes, in this case I made a multiple selection, or I can act upon an entire page range, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. In this case, I want to act upon the selection, and the second thing is simply to tell it what do you want it to do, and you can have it link or unlink the boxes. In this case, we want to link all of those boxes together. Now, in order to do that, it's going to take the text in each box and combine it all together into a single story, link all the boxes, and then flow the new story through that chain. If it were to just do that with the existing text content, it would probably cause reflow because there are likely areas of these boxes that are unfilled, and it would sort of reflow the text and change which box each of these headlines is in. We don't want that to happen in this case, so we're going to check this option, keep text in same boxes. And it's going to do whatever it needs to do in order to ensure that it doesn't disturb the position of the text. It may have to insert next box characters and things like that into the text flow. So I'll click OK, and it will think about it for a minute. And when it's done, it will appear as if nothing happened. But that's exactly what we want. We don't want it to look any different visually. But when we click in here and do a select all, we can now see that it is quite different. We have a single text flow throughout that entire chain. Now let's say that we wanted to unlink those boxes. Well, the same thing. We'll select all of them, go to Utilities, Linkster. We're still going to act on the selection, but this time we're going to unlink. And in the case of unlinking, we have 4 different methods that can be used. These methods come into play when the selection does not encompass the entire story. In other words, let me just cancel this. I may select only one of these boxes in the middle of this linked chain and come in and say to unlink just that box out of the chain. Let me just make my original selection because we want to actually unlink everything. And we'll take a look at those methods. So the first method, basically each of them show an icon that indicates the structure of the story after the unlink action. where B represents the selected box or boxes, and A and C represent the story that will occur before and after the box that we're extracting from the chain. So as you can see in the first method, it's going to wind up with 3 stories: everything before the selection, one for the selection itself, and then one for everything after the section. In the second method, it's going to extract the selected boxes but leave everything before and after as its own linked story. Sometimes you're just trying to pull one box out and you want to leave everything else linked. The second and third methods both do a similar thing, just in different directions. It takes the selected box and leaves it as part of either the preceding story or the trailing story. So it either combines the selected box with A before or with C after. So in this case, we'll click OK, and I'll think about it again for just a second. And again, it doesn't look like anything happened, and that's exactly what we want. But if I go into one of those boxes and select all, we can see that in fact these are no longer a linked chain. Now, let's take a look at an example of why you might want to do it across pages. What we have here is our Palm Restaurant cookbook, and some of you may remember this from previous demos, including our EPUB eSeminar. And that's what I want to talk about here. So there are various use cases why you might want to unlink a story across a page range. In this particular case, let's take a look at our story. I'll click in one and do a select all. And we can see that this story is flowed throughout this entire chapter, but it does have occasionally some callouts and sidebar material that inserts itself in the middle of the story, sometimes with runaround, sometimes by just making room for it on the page. Now, if you remember back to the EPUB session we did, when I extract this into reflow view, sometimes I don't want it to be an entire story, because if I extract this story as a single reflow component, then I will not be able to interleave these sidebars and callouts in between to get them to position exactly in the same position that they are here relative to the main body content. So in order to facilitate that reflow extraction, I want to break up this main story every position where there's a call out or a sidebar. Now it just so happens that the way this layout was created, the sidebars and callouts are always at the beginning or end of a page. So if I were to use the unlink every page action, that would give me a big head start to chunk up this story into components where I could insert the callout and sidebar components between the body components in the reflow view. Anyway, this demo is not about reflow, so let's take a look actually at how the unlinking works. I'm going to go back to Utilities, Linkster. In this case, my scope is going to be pages. In fact, it defaults to pages because I don't have a selection currently, so it knows I must want to act on pages. I'm going to unlink all of them. The action that I want to perform, obviously, is to unlink. I'm going to click OK. This one will take just a minute, so we get the little progress bar. So it comes back, and now each of these pages is a discrete story. If I go into each of those pages and do a select all, we can see that that page now is an independent text run. So I can, for example, take this call out, I can actually position it between these two stories. So that's Linkster. The next utility that I want to talk about is called ShapeMaker. ShapeMaker is essentially like a wizard, sort of, for creating various types of geometric shapes. Obviously, QuarkXPress is a page layout application, and often while creating pages, you need to make all sorts of strange shapes. Sometimes boxes with single corners that have effects applied to them, perhaps starbursts and things like that. Now, you could always do things like stars. Let's say that we want to make a starburst here on our page. Okay, there's a star. And let's say that I come through and I give this some styling. We'll go ahead and we'll give it a color. Let's make that a little lighter. We'll give it a frame. All right, so all this I do while I'm laying out the page. But then let's say that the next day I decide that I want a different kind of starburst there. I want the points to be of a different count. I want the spike depth to be different. Previously, I'd have to go back to the starburst tool. I'd have to make a new star with different attributes. I'd have to somehow reset the appearance of the one that I already created. It would be easier if I could just select this existing star and change its attributes. And ShapeMaker allows you to do that. So I'm going to select our starburst. We'll go to the Utilities menu, come down to ShapeMaker, and we're going to start on the Polygons tab because actually a star is a form of polygon. So the type is going to be stars. The sides, let's say, and I want to make it fewer. Let's say 24. All right, let's make them not so deep. We'll make it 80%. Well, that looks like the one I already have. Let's do even less. There we go. And let's say I do want to make the stars a little deeper, so we'll do 60. Now the key here is I've specified the type of star that I want. I'm going to check this option down here, Alter Current Box. That tells it not to make a new one, but take the existing one that is selected, sample its size, and create this shape in this position, in this size, using the appearance attributes of the existing box. So when I click Create, I've just modified that star, and I didn't have to go back and recolor it and things like that. But let's take a look at all of the different shapes that we can create in ShapeMaker. So I'm going to go back to Utilities, ShapeMaker, and we'll start on the Waves tab. So a wave is just what it sounds like, and a wave is essentially, it starts out life as a rectangle, and then you can apply a wave effect to each side of that rectangle. And that's what these first four pop-up menus do, is it allows you to specify for each side of the rectangle, do you want to apply a wave to it? And you have two different waves that you can define. So you can select wave 1 or wave 2 for each side, or you can opt to make that side flat. So let's say that we just want sort of a wavy tower shape. Well, the first thing we're going to do is enter the size of the shape that I'm going to create. So let's make it 6 inches tall by, 6 inches tall by, let's say, 2 inches wide. There we go. And I want the top and bottom to be flat, so I'm going to go up here and say top flat, bottom flat. Left and right are both going to be wave 1, which is these first three set of controls. So below the side controls, we have the controls for wave 1 and wave 2. Now, right now we're just going to work with wave 1 because I'm only using that one up here. The kinds of attributes that I can control on a wave are, its frequency, so how wavy is it. We can just do a single, hump or multiples. That's expressed as a number here. Phase is where exactly does that wave begin on the path. Sometimes, for example, at this bottom corner, you may need the wave to start out going in one particular direction or the other. So in this case, in the lower left corner of the preview, we can see the wave is starting out going to the upper left. If we wanted it to go to the right, then we would just change that phase so that it's starting at a different location in the waveform. And then finally, amplitude is, how sort of deep is that wave. If you want to keep it subtle, you just bump that control up a little bit. If you really want to have a sharp S-curve, you can really turn that up. Now, the control keep waves parallel defines whether or not that phase is kept in sync, so that I can leave it here and get sort of this vase shape, or I can check keep waves parallel, and then it will always look sort of like a ribbon shape. Okay. You can specify the content type for the box that's going to be created. It can either be a text box, picture, none, Or if you want to do an open path, or what we call a line, you can tell it to create a text path or rule path, which means a path with a content type of none, a rule or a path that's just going to be stroked. So in this case, I'll do a none box, we'll click create, and there's my wavy shape. Now you can see, even though this is a pretty straightforward geometric shape, this would have been difficult to draw with the pen tool, to get the whole thing, totally straight, and trying to, eyeball this part and trying to get this last piece, and, to draw that precisely would be a little difficult. So this one that ShapeMaker provided to us is very precise. So we'll just delete that one and go back. Utilities, ShapeMaker. And let's go to the next shape type, polygons. Now, usually when you think of polygons, you think of these guys, regular polygons, which are going to be, something as simple as a triangle. So a polygon has to have at least 3 sides. If you've ever tried to draw a perfect triangle in QuarkXPress with the pen tool, you know that it's not easy, and often I end up just using things like merge and split with rectangles to sort of carve it up into a triangle and then massage it into the shape that I want. But ShapeMaker is a really quick way to make perfect triangles. But you might also, do other types of polygons. Stars are a form of polygon, and ShapeMaker lets you create all sorts of interesting looking stars with different point counts. You can do a 6-pointed, a 7-pointed. It lets me define the inner radius, which specifies how deep the star's spikes are going to be. If I enter a large percentage there, those spikes are going to be very shallow. The inner radius is basically the radius of the bottom of the spike, and if that inner radius is 80% of the outer area, then the spike depth won't be very much. But if I make the inner radius very small, let's say 20%, then I'm going to get a really long spike. Secondary is something that you won't use very often, but secondary basically says if you turn it on, you can have it spike again at the intersection of the original spikes. And again, I can make those deep, or I can make those shallow, including insetting that shape. Kind of gives you sort of like a ninja throwing star shape. That's kind of interesting. Other things I can make here include cool things like spirograms, where it will make that polygon shape, but do it sort of just as strokes, as open paths. Random polygons is always kind of interesting. It'll give you some interesting effects. And you can click the new random button to just cycle through completely random shapes. Sometimes that'll spark some creativity. And then other standard polygon shapes that you might want to create in your design. One is the golden rectangle. Those of you with design backgrounds will remember that the golden rectangle is a rectangle whose uses the golden ratio, which is a mathematically significant ratio between height and width that is considered one of the most aesthetically pleasing shapes, and is a ratio that exists in nature. And like I said, if you want to really geek out on the math of the golden rectangle, I encourage you to look that one up on Wikipedia. The other one is double square. I mean, double square is just something that's literally, width is 2 times its height, and this is something that you often need to create in designs, and this will give you a little shortcut to do that. Okay, let's go back to regular polygons and take a look at some of these other settings. So we'll do a 5-sided polygon. Now, the edges menu really lets you do some interesting effects with polygons. Typically, you would think of their sides as flat, but you can also apply a bunch of different effects to the edges. Like you can curve the edges with either a concave effect, meaning it's going to suck it in, what some tools would call a pucker effect on that polygon, or convex, which pushes the edges out, what you may have heard of as a bloat effect. The curvature slider will let you control the amount of that curving. So we can really turn up the curvature on a convex polygon and get sort of a flower shape. Or if we go concave and really pull that in, we can get sort of an interesting curved star. And if we go so far that it inverts upon itself, we can get some really interesting patterns that sort of give us some snowflake patterns. Orientation is simply going to allow you to rotate that shape as you put it in position. If you have a pretty good idea of the orientation that you want it to have, you can go ahead and set it here. This is something that you can set afterwards by simply rotating the object. Now, random points basically takes the math and messes with it so that you get these random shapes based on your custom attributes. And if you turn up the randomness, you can make it just a little, or you can make it a lot, but either way you can always click new random and sort of cycle through these random shapes and get some interesting stuff. You might want to make multiple random shapes to create a pattern or something like that. The next one is spirals. And spirals are something that are notoriously difficult to create with the pen tool. If you've ever tried, then I'm sure you're familiar with how difficult, I would actually say impossible, that is. First, you can define the type of the spiral. The default Archimedes spiral essentially has the same distance between each wind of the spiral. This is sort of a very clean, consistent spiral that does not get tighter as it winds towards the middle. The golden spiral does wind in. This is more like sort of a nautilus shell shape, and if you wanted to create something that looks like it's disappearing off into the distance, if I give it some more winds, we can see what that looks like. You'd want to pick golden. The third option is custom, and it lets you sort of define your own balance between those two approaches. You can define the number of winds here in the winds field, and then rate essentially defines how quickly that's going to fall off. A high number is going to wind very tightly in the middle. A low number is going to be more along the lines of that Archimedes spiral. You can define the direction, clockwise or counterclockwise, and the smoothness of the curve if you want that to be sort of more of a geometric spiral. And often you might want a spiral to be a text path, because spiral is always going to result in an open path, never a closed box or a path that you would fill with a color. So the last shape type is rectangles, and so a lot of people aren't sure about this one right offhand. Why would you use ShapeMaker to make a rectangle? Because there's already a rectangle tool in QuarkXPress. Well, the most common use case for rectangles is what we're looking at here. A rectangle that has a corner effect that is applied not equally to all four sides. I'll just cancel this. So in QuarkXPress, if I make a rectangle, we do have the corner style attribute down here on the measurements palette, and I can say rounded, and I can use little ticker controls and make that radius bigger or smaller, but it's going to be equal on all four sides. We get a lot of requests, people asking, how do I make it rounded only on two sides? And there are always workarounds for doing that. You could use the merge function, for example, to do it, but now it's as easy as going to ShapeMaker, tell it that you want some of your corners, what it calls normal, meaning a regular square corner, or you want some other effect, like in this case rounded, just on the two right corners. We're going to check that alter current box option, create, and now we get that half capsule shape. Now, one thing to keep in mind about this particular effect is that the result of ShapeMaker is a Bezier path. So if I go in and look at the control points, we can see that it is just a raw Bezier path and can be edited as such. It's no longer a QuarkXPress effect like the regular corner styles are. And the reason you need to keep that in mind is because if you later change the aspect ratio of this shape, you will distort your curvatures a little bit if you use something like a rounded corner. Let's say later on I come in and I make this guy half as tall. Well, you can see now that the rounding of that corner is no longer correct. So if you have to do that, you might want to apply the effect sort of once you know the size and position of that box, or if you do have to change it, you can always go back into ShapeMaker, adjust the values to be appropriate for this size. I will have to change my radius a little bit. We'll make it like, let's try 1/2 inch. There we go. We're going to do the alter current box, create, and now I think I got alter current box. Let me try that again. ShapeMaker, alter current box. Okay, there, I got it that time. And now it's back to having a smoothly rounded corner. So let's go back to the ShapeMaker dialog, and it has one last thing I want to talk about. So let's go back to the ShapeMaker dialog. There are other attributes that we can define for rectangles, such as curvature. Let's set this to more of a square shape. We'll turn up our radius, and we'll do an effect like concave. In fact, let's look at different effects on each one. Concave, we'll do bevel here. Let's give it a little more radius so we can see it better. Pointed, and then inset, which is sort of like a chisel effect. There we go. Now, curvature is going to essentially apply those like bloat effects to the rounded styles, which includes pointed and concave. So you can turn that up if you want to get kind of an interesting effect there on the curvature. And then balance really tweaks the shape. To be totally honest, I'm not sure what balance does mathematically, but if you play with it, you can get some very interesting shapes. You can sort of get some minor tweaks on your existing shape. And if we turn on radial, it will do that balance in more of a circular motion. So you get some interesting type of random shapes that way as well. Finally, on the last tab, presets, that's where you can save the different attributes that you specify for a shape if you want to re-invoke that shape later on. So for example, like I said, rounded corner is used a lot, single-sided rounded corner, so I saved one of those. If I want to use it, I'll just select it there in the Presets tab, click Use Settings, it'll populate the tabs with those settings, and then click Create. And it'll create that shape for me. Now, the way you make a preset, let's just delete these guys. Go into ShapeMaker, we'll go to the tab we want to create, we'll give it some settings. Let's do 6, we'll make a really long spike, and then let's give it a little bit of swirl. There we go. Let's say I want to use that again later on, so I'm going to go to the Presets tab. I'm going to give it a name. We'll call this Twirled Star, and then just click Save. And there we go. There's our twirled star. So we just only really kind of scratched the surface of the diversity of different things that you can create with ShapeMaker. Let's take a look at some of that range. On this page, we have a bunch of different stuff created with the wave shape type. Some of them are pretty straightforward, like these two in the lower left. You know, shapes like this guy here, you can do some interesting stuff like put text in there and get a wavy text block. Just go ahead and set that to a none fill. We'll do kind of some small text, and let's just jabber into there, right? And you can see you can get some really interesting text effects there. We'd probably want to put that on justified. There we go. Get some really cool stuff there. Or, if you really go crazy with the controls, you can get some interesting effects like these sort of star-looking things. These are actually waves with different sorts of settings. If we go down, let's take a look at polygons, and you can see that there's a wide range of shapes that you can create on the Polygons tab, from standard regular polygons over here, different types of stars, different types of bloated and puckered stars with interesting shapes. Here's some twirls over here, sort of some flowery looking shapes down here at the bottom. And if you use effects like merge and split, you can really start combining these things to get some interesting looks. Like I might put this on top of this other shape, select them both, go up to difference, and sort of knock a hole in that one flower shape with the other. Or I might simply stick them together, just kind of overlap them like this, select them both, and do something like exclusive OR, and it'll knock out that area of overlap, and you can get some interesting color effects with that. The next one is spirals. You know what spirals look like. Again, they're really hard to draw, and this lets us get a head start on that. And you can do some cool stuff, effects with things like dash styles. This one uses arrowheads. This one over here has a stripe on it with a really interesting look. If you go back and look at the conditional styles eSeminar from last month, I used the spiral ShapeMaker tool to create a text path where the text was getting smaller as it wound off into the distance. I encourage you to check that out if you haven't seen it. And then rectangles, these don't all look like rectangles. There's our standard sort of rounded on one side guy. Things like, even just a regular cross, you don't always have to make that with merge and split. You can make that a lot quicker now with ShapeMaker. But some really interesting other types of effects, even some sort of random geometric shapes here. Sometimes ShapeMaker really sort of helps you discover some creativity if you want to just make patterns. Okay, so that's ShapeMaker, and I hope you guys really experiment with that and find some interesting things to create and have a lot of fun with that one. The next one is called ImageGrid. Now, ImageGrid is basically a tool just to help you quickly lay out a bunch of images on a page in a clean looking grid with the exact specifications that you want. You might do this because you have a big collection of images and you want to make like contact sheets out of those. Maybe you're doing a catalog. So there are various reasons why you might want to do this. Now, in version 8, we did add drag and drop import. So you could already get a lot of pictures onto the page all at once, but if you use drag and drop to do this, let's not do that one. Let's do this guy. Here's the kind of effect that you would get. Yes, you would. Who's that guy? That guy doesn't belong. Let's get his name out of the way. Okay, so you would get all of the pictures, but then you would have to lay them out, in a clean grid. So that's no fun. Let's get rid of all of those. And this time we're going to use the ImageGrid feature to do that. It is also under the Utilities menu. All the features we're talking about today are under Utilities. We're going to go Utilities, ImageGrid. And you can see there are various properties here that I can configure to tell it how to build up the grid that I want. In this case, I want to increase the gap between the boxes. Let's give it a 1/4 of an inch gap. We want it to come in at a fixed size, which is 2 inches by 2 inches. I could also define the size of the box by rows and columns, and we'll take a look at that. Let's just do that, and we're going to import at 100% and tell it to fit the box to the picture. So it won't actually be 2 by 2, it'll be the size of the picture once it's done fitting it. Once you're done configuring all of this, and we'll look at some more of these settings in a minute, but I want to get to the main part, which is you click on the Process Folder button here. You browse for the folder that contains the images that you want. You go into that folder, click Choose, and it'll lay out that grid for you. So let's get rid of that alien again. He doesn't belong there. So all I have to do now is I can bring these over here to my other page, select all those guys, bring them down, and I was able to very quickly set up a well-formatted grid, a lot more quickly than drag and drop would have allowed. Let's take a look at another example. I'm going to insert another page here. Get rid of those guys. Okay. Let's say I have a lot more images, and let's say in this case I'm not actually designing a spread, I'm just doing like that contact page concept where I want to gang up a bunch of images on a page so I can print out sheets and review them and things like that. So I'm going to go back to Utilities, ImageGrid, and this time I'm going to use auto size. I actually want, let's do 4 columns by, I don't know, however many rows that turns out to be. Let's enter 6 rows. And I'm going to select a folder full of product shots. These are my shoes. Oh, hold on, let's start over. I didn't mean to actually click that button yet. Let's go back, Utilities, ImageGrid. All right, let's try this again. Process folder, shoes, okay. Okay, let's try this again. So I wanted to show you the option here, add picture info. So this is going to list some information about these images, the file name, color model, format, and resolution. These are things that are interesting to me maybe while I'm reviewing my scans and things like that. If I add the picture info, I can elect to do just the name. If I uncheck name only, it's going to do all of the picture info, which includes all the stuff that I just listed. If I want to, I can define a specific text size for that. Let's make it a little smaller. We'll do 8 point. Otherwise, it would default to the size of the normal style sheet. Things like apply drop shadow. In this case, I don't need that. An offset value for the drop shadow. If I were doing a design page, I might want to use a box shape other than a straight rectangle. Here I can do a rounded corner rectangle or oval, and I can tell it to use my tool preferences if I've captured some more advanced settings for the box style I want to be applied. I can capture those settings in the tool preferences. That will be the default setting for that tool, and then it will use those settings when it creates the boxes. In this case, let's not do 100%, we'll do fit proportionally to box. The box size will be defined by the auto size rules up here. Okay, we'll do process folder, there are my shoes. Click choose, and there we go. So there is our product grid. If I turn on guides, you can see that it gave us a very well-formed grid there, and it automatically put in the picture file info, including file name, resolution, dimensions, format, and color model. So that's ImageGrid. I hope that saves you guys some time. The last one that we're going to look at is called Cloner. Now, Cloner is for duplicating boxes or pages to other pages or to other layouts. The most obvious use of this feature is sort of as a super paste in place. Whenever you want to paste in place but do it across an entire range of pages. So here in my article you can see that I have these sidebar objects over here, and they should exist on every page. Now I could do this with master pages, but sometimes for various reasons you don't want to use master pages. Perhaps you received a document that didn't already use master pages. You don't want to now apply master pages because it may disturb other things. You just want to replicate these objects. If I zoom out, we can see that we don't have those side materials on any other pages. So all I have to do to get them on all of the pages is select them, and then I'm going to go to Utilities, Cloner. And just like the Linkster dialog, the first thing I'm going to do in here is to tell it what is the source of the action? Do I want to act upon the current selection, or do I want to act upon an entire page range? In this case, we'll do selection. And then what is the destination? Typically it will be the current layout, but you can do all sorts of other destinations, including another QuarkXPress file that's not even currently open. You can create a new project or a new layout in the current project. I can duplicate to all open layouts, or I can duplicate to any of the other layouts within my current project. We'll look at these split commands later on when we look at pages. So my clone destination will be current layout. To page, what page do I want to start the clone operation? Well, I want to start it after this one. We're currently on page 2, so I'm going to enter page 3 in there. And then copies. How many additional, how many pages do I actually want to paste to? In this case, I want to paste across 9 pages. So I'm going to click OK, and it takes us all the way to the bottom, which is the last page that it duplicated it to. And as I scroll up, you can see that it now duplicated that assembly of boxes across every page in our document. Now, you also saw some page-based cloning commands in there. One way you might use that is we've gotten a lot of requests, and I know that I've often wanted the ability to duplicate an existing page. Sometimes you're on the page layout palette and you want to take this guy and you want to right click and say duplicate that page, but there's no duplicate action in here. You can duplicate a master page, but often you want to duplicate a layout page with all of the boxes on that page. Cloner will actually let you do that. So in this case, we're on the very last page of our layout. Let's go to Utilities, Cloner. This time the source is going to be pages, and it's going to be just the page that we're on right now, which is page 11. The destination is going to be current layout to page. I want to make a new page 12. You click OK. When I zoom out, you can see that now I have 2 of the exact same page. And sometimes that's useful if you want to, make a copy of a page and then tweak that copy slightly. Let's go back and look at some of the other options in there. Utilities, Cloner. When you duplicate pages, you get the option to make sections. So if I turn on make sections, then it is going to maintain the section starts that are in the range that I'm duplicating. This is significant because particularly when I'm duplicating to another layout, I very well might be duplicating each section as a chunk. So I may have authored this with each section in a different document. Now I want to combine those layouts, and so I might want to create sections in this new Uber layout that I'm creating. The options under Make Sections, keep contiguous or multiple sections. What does that mean? Well, what that means is if the original page range itself has multiple sections in it, then it will maintain those multiple sections if I select multiple sections. If I select Keep Contiguous, then it's going to resection all of those pages as a single section in the destination. And then finally, Copy Style Sheets does just what it sounds like. It determines whether or not any style sheets used in this layout are also duplicated to the other layout. You may or may not want to do that, so you have that option here. So as you can see, Cloner can be a real time saver and let you do some stuff that you've probably found yourself needing to do in the past while creating pages. Let's go back to slides. So that's pretty much it for this eSeminar. If you haven't already checked out version 9, go do it. There's no reason not to. Go to Quark.com, download a free 30-day test drive for Mac or Windows. It's a fully functional version of the application. There are no restrictions other than that it will time bomb out in 30 days, and you won't be, after 30 days, then it will go into sort of a save disabled mode. But up until then, you can save, you can print, you can do whatever you need to do to evaluate it. So thanks a lot for coming out, and we'll see you next time.